Hi Meredith.
Hello.
How are you today?
Good. Excited to be here.
So today we're here with Meredith Goldstein from the Globe's Love Letters. And Meredith, can you tell us what you do? Please explain to us.
I'm a writer of a lot of different things. So I've written some books, and I also write for the Globe, where I write features and the advice column, Love Letters. So I have two novels. One was about single people at a wedding, and that's called The Singles. And the second novel was called Chemistry Lessons, which was about a young single woman who tries to manipulate her love life. It's sort of a rom-com. And then I wrote a nonfiction book about my advice column. So clearly I'm sticking with the theme, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, which is people finding love or not finding love.
And where'd your fascination with love stem from?
I think I've always been a real voyeur in people's lives and wanting to know how people have relationships and what makes them happy and how relationships evolve. So to me, it's all sort of like an interesting psychological, philosophical study of, how relationships can bring us happiness. So I think about it probably too much.
Mm-hmm. Is there some sort of motivation that made you pursue this career in journalism and as a novelist and all of that?
Well, my parents were both musicians and they were really good, and they both went to Juilliard, and I could not pretend that I could be a musician because I was decidedly mediocre. So I thought maybe I'll write about music and I'll highlight the work of great musicians. And I loved writing. So from there I realized that, maybe it wasn't really about music writing, it was much more about writing about anything that people do that sort of bring them joy. And eventually that moved into relationship writing.
Is there someone in particular who really inspired you to pursue that path?
I mean, there are so many great writers and journalists who inspired me, but for me, my late grandmother was a huge reader. I mean, I grew up just staring at her incredible bookshelf, and her bookshelf, she actually arranged it separated by gender, so women on one side and men on the other, and then in alphabetical order. So as a kid, I used to go over to the books and find the G's and think, where would my book go when I write one? So it was like an absolute honor to be able to slide my book in that bookshelf when I finally wrote one. And so I think I just always appreciated her love of storytelling. She always took women writers incredibly seriously, so I could take myself seriously, which is really a gift.
So what were some of the biggest challenges that you found in pursuing this path?
I mean, I think when you start with journalism, which I did and still pursue, it's an ever-changing, ever-evolving world. So one day people are, reading newspapers, and the next day they're reading online, and the next day they're listening to podcasts. So you have to be willing to move with your audience and to give them stories and the information they need and want in the way that they'll receive them. And I think that has been challenging but also exhilarating, because I'm also a reader, right? So I read differently. Some people want to read on a Kindle, some people want to hear words, and I think about that in my writing now, just how versatile it gets based on the needs of the audience.
And so would you say now it's kind of like an omni-channel approach to pushing the content out?
You have to think, there's some people who just want to get newsletters in their inbox. Mm-hmm. So imagine all these different audiences and how do you please them all at once? And when I started in this, I was, people were just reading newspapers. Mm-hmm. I still have a great print readership, and they're very loyal and wonderful. There's obviously a big online readership, but the podcast audience just keeps growing. And I write for the podcast very differently.
And probably makes it easy too for women on the go.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love listening to podcasts and doing 8 other things. Mm-hmm. So it's a nice background.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever have self-doubt? And if so, how did you deal with those situations?
Even right now. Certainly.
You're doing great.
Thank you. I mean, daily, hourly. I think that it's a part of the creative process. It's certainly a part of the professional process. And I think that imposter syndrome, this idea that every time you're in a room, you're like, did I earn being here? Do I deserve to be here? It's a necessary thing. The people I meet who know they belong everywhere and believe they should get everything are probably a little bit in trouble. So, you have to temper it though, because I think that knowing that we all have it, it's actually kind of comforting. So it's okay. At least that's what I try to tell myself.
What were some of your largest life lessons?
I mean, I think for many people who have a passion for something, it's hard to know when to stop. And I think I used to sort of, decide how good I was based on how many hours I spent doing it. And as I get older, I realized that taking time off and just sort of sitting around and watching TV or going out, taking a walk, meeting a friend, that's maybe where I get my best creative idea. And that's maybe where I have the moment to say, oh wait, I figured out what I've been missing. So I think I'm much nicer to myself, or at least trying to be, about taking real time off, because I actually think it's part of the creative process.
All right, let's talk about love letters.
Okay.
So what was the funniest question you ever received?
You know, in 10 years of doing this, the one that really just made me laugh, partly because I didn't have an immediate answer and I was baffled by the question, was a woman who'd had a date with a guy, been intimate with him, and she was upset that he hadn't called her an Uber home. And I think the headline on it was, "He didn't call me an Uber." And she just thought that this was chivalry. Like, you know, you spend a precious moment with a woman, you should not just open her door, but call her an Uber. And to me, it was this marker of chivalry changing, right? It wasn't just about doors and paying checks. It was like, here's a new technology way to show your interest. And so many people in the comments section were like, lady, call your own Uber. Or like, you're a feminist, you're a woman, and like, call your own Uber. And other people were like, oh, it's kind of nice when someone does that. But had these, you know, ideas changed, and this I had never heard of. So it just made me laugh that like, you think you've heard everything, and that I had not heard. That kind of disappointment.
Now, what do you think about that?
I like, it's nice, but certainly not required.
And what was one of the most common questions you've received?
When I first started writing the column 10 years ago, a lot of the questions were about snooping. And by that I mean people breaking into other people's accounts, like email accounts, texts, Facebook messages, and then maybe seeing something they don't love. Like, oh, I don't like that, you know, she friended this person and wrote to him. And then there becomes this big question of cheating versus snooping, and which is better, which is worse, I should say.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like, is it ethical? Is it unethical? What happens if you find something, you don't find something?
You know, I'm a privacy girl. I love privacy, and I don't think it's ever ethical. But I do have, there's one commenter actually who's been commenting on love letters for so many years, and she believes that go ahead and snoop, because if you're at that point with someone, if you find yourself doing that, you're either gonna find something, not find something, and eventually you're gonna hit that wall. I think that if you've done it in multiple relationships, it's something to, you know, get help for. But I think that, you know, sure, if you find the worst thing you were looking for, that's terrible, but both things are terrible, right? Like at that point, there's no trust. But I think people are allowed to have secret conversations and things that are just for them. So this idea that we have a little bit of something that's our own is really okay and healthy.
What do you have for suggestions to meeting a life partner?
Life partner.
Yeah.
Because I'm a little old school about this stuff, and I think that so many people have these like grand communities and chosen families and wonderful people in their lives, and you know, families they're related to, we should all be setting each other up more. Whenever I read like old romance novels, it's always about like families putting people together, and I want you to meet my son. And it's like, and I like to pretend that, because I think that in a world where we're so disconnected and feel a lack of accountability, like I could date you once and never see you again, and you could tell me 50 lies, this idea that someone is in the network of humans we know is exciting, and there's this common ground. So I know incredible couples who met on apps and online. I just think that if there's one thing I wish we did more, it was just set each other up.
As a Bostonian,
yes,
what are some of the most fun things you like to do in the city? What are some of your favorite things to do?
One of the great things about being an author here is that when I first put out a book, I realized how many bookstores there were. So now the fact that we have Trident, which has like a bar and a restaurant and a bookstore, and Brookline is expanding, Brookline Booksmith. So I love bookstores. And I'm not just saying that because they sell my book. I love going to a reading.
What are some of your favorite Paridaez pieces, and where do you like to wear them?
My core piece is Sparrow,
Yeah.
and I have it in black, and it's like, I am not like the most motivated and ambitious person when I'm costuming myself. And so I like things that are really simple and that I can wear over and over in different ways. I don't even have it right now because it has been stolen from me from my Aunt Nancy. So yeah, it's the piece most likely to be borrowed too, I have to say. So I think that's, yeah, I mean, it's like I never notice my own clothes until I'm like, oh, I can't live without that thing. And that is, I would put that on.
The thing that you always reach for.
The thing you reach for, yeah.
I love that.
That and like pajamas. Like in the rest of my life, but when I'm leaving the house.
Because it makes you feel like you're wearing pajamas in real life.
All I need is clothing that makes me feel like pajamas and that's
Yeah.
the goal.
Do you have any last words of wisdom for our viewers here?
Never be afraid to ask for the things you want and to let people know, whether it's a setup, whether you're sick of being single and want some help. I think, you know, no matter what kind of imposter syndrome and insecurities you have, we all need help, and sometimes it's just best to ask.
Yeah, I mean, what's the worst that can happen,
Get
right?
to know, and you ask somebody else. It's not that, you know, and just remember when somebody asks you to have that kindness.